Deathcore Legacy Book 1 Part 3. Chapter 17. Orbital Station Omega. Cygnus 13 hung above the Cygnus core world like an ancient crown of steel and light. Its outer rings turned slowly against the glow of the planet below, each section lined with diplomatic docks, defense batteries, ceremonial banners, and enough shield emitters to make the station look peaceful only to people who did not understand weapons. Beyond it, the wounded DEATHCORE formation and the Cygnus fleet held station side by side, scarred from battle, shields warm, weapons safed, but not sleeping. Inside the station's grand accord chamber, history waited beneath armed guard. The chamber had been built for ceremony. High arched walls of dark stone, gold-veined floor panels, and a ceiling that projected the stars of Cygnus in slow, majestic motion. But ceremony had been forced to make room for war. DEATHCORE Marines stood along one side in black armor. Cygnus honor guards stood along the other, towering and silent in ceremonial battle plating. Between them, diplomats, aides, intelligence officers, and medical staff moved with the careful tension of people trying not to look at the blood still drying on everyone's uniforms. Ambassador Stephen Gardo entered first, with First Secretary Carla Sanchez on his left and Dr. Mark Henry on his right. His coat had been cleaned enough for protocol, but not enough to hide the torn seam near the shoulder. He had refused a replacement. "Let them see what it costs to get here," he had told Sanchez on the shuttle ride over. Now he walked to the treaty table with his chin raised and the treaty packet held against his chest like a shield made of paper and law. Fleet Admiral Edison followed moments later. The entire chamber seemed to recognize him before any announcer could speak. Conversations died. Guards straightened. Even the Cygnus officials who had never seen him in person understood the shape of command when it entered a room. He wore a dress uniform dark enough to swallow the station lights, but there was no polish in his eyes, no ceremonial softness. The man who had ordered recovery, interrogation, and restraint now walked toward the treaty table carrying grief like a sidearm. Fleet Admiral Vorgon entered from the opposite archway with 3 Cygnus ambassadors and their aides behind him. He wore no helmet, only a mantle of black and bronze command armor, etched with imperial oaths. His 6 eyes swept the chamber once, cataloging guards, exits, cameras, and threats before settling on Edison. For a heartbeat, the 2 fleet admirals simply looked at one another across the treaty table. Then, Vorgon placed one massive fist against his chest in formal salute. Edison returned the gesture with a crisp, human salute. "Old friend," Vorgon said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "I wish this day had arrived beneath quieter stars." "So do I," Edison replied, "but quiet stars do not make strong treaties." A low murmur moved through the Cygnus delegation. Gardo stepped forward before the room could decide whether the words were diplomatic poetry or military threat. "Then let the record show," he said, voice clear, "that humanity and Cygnus meet today not as conqueror and supplicant, not as patron and lesser power, but as 2 sovereign civilizations standing in the aftermath of a shared attack." One of the Cygnus ambassadors, tall and silver-crested, inclined his head. "Ambassador Gardo, certain voices within the council will claim this emergency session lacks legitimacy." Gardo looked directly at him. "Then those voices may file their objection beside the wreckage of the Nova fleet that tried to prevent this meeting." For the first time since entering the chamber, Vorgon smiled. It was not friendly, it was approving. "That answer will irritate them." "Good," Gardo said. "I came prepared to sign a treaty, not soothe cowards." Sanchez opened the treaty packet and placed 3 sealed documents on the table. The first bore Earth's crest. The second bore the imperial sigil of Cygnus. The third was blank except for its title: Sole Cygnus Mutual Defense and Sovereign Recognition Accord. Above the table, recorder drones came alive in silent blue rings. Every word, every gesture, every hesitation would be preserved for both civilizations. Dr. Henry adjusted his glasses, glanced at the Cygnus scientists standing nearby, and placed a sealed data case beside the treaty. Included under Article 7 is limited shared analysis from the deep space biological encounter in Sol territory. Sensor records, tissue studies, migration uncertainty, and threat pattern projections. No restricted weapon systems, no classified propulsion cores, no dark fleet. He stopped himself, then corrected with a faint cough. No DEATHCORE fleet command architecture. Vorgon's lower eyes narrowed with amusement. Your scientist edits himself under pressure. Useful trait. Henry gave a stiff nod. I prefer being useful to being vaporized. A brief ripple of laughter passed through the human side. Even two Cygnus aides clicked their mandibles in what translation software politely labeled restrained amusement. The sound helped the room breathe again. Then Edison stepped to the table, and the chamber quieted. Before we sign, he said, let the record also show what this treaty is not. It is not surrender. It is not tribute. It is not Earth kneeling to Cygnus, nor Cygnus shielding Earth out of charity. This accord recognizes that Nova's attack was not only an act of war against two fleets, it was an attempt to murder the future before it could speak. Vorgon stepped beside him. And let the record show Cygnus does not accept rot inside its council, poison inside its military, or foreign hands guiding imperial voices from the shadows. By this accord, Earth gains standing to assist in the investigation of Nova corruption within Cygnus authority. A visible shock moved through several Cygnus aides. One whispered something too low for translation. Vorgon did not look at them. He did not need to. Any council member who fears that clause, he added, may consider my suspicion already awakened. Gardo placed his hand on the treaty's activation seal. Then we proceed. The treaty table awakened. Lines of gold and blue light crawled across the documents, translating each article into human standard, Cygnus imperial script, and a dozen legal forms recognized by both governments. Article 1 recognized Earth and Cygnus as equal sovereign powers under mutual treaty law. Article 2 established shared threat intelligence. Article 3 created emergency military liaison authority. Article 4 authorized joint defense response against confirmed Nova aggression. Article 5 opened limited cultural, academic, medical, and civilian technology exchange. Article 6 created protected diplomatic corridors. Article 7 gave both civilizations authority to investigate deep space predator events and old frontier dead zones. Article 8 named Nova interference as grounds for collective security action. When the final article appeared, the chamber lights dimmed. Every recorder drone angled toward the table. Gardo looked at Edison. Edison looked at Vorgon. Vorgon looked toward the stars projected above them, then back to the treaty. For Earth, Gardo said, and signed first. The human seal burned bright across the document. Vorgon placed one clawed hand over the Cygnus seal. For Cygnus, he said, for honor, for the dead, and for the enemies who failed to frighten us. His signature struck the document like a brand. The Cygnus seal flared beside Earth's, and the two lights twisted together into a single symbol above the table. Sul and Cygnus, bound by defense, recognition, and shared consequence. For one breath, no one moved. Then the station's ancient bells rang. The sound rolled through Omega Cygnus 13, through the docking arms, through medical wards, through damaged ships and silent hangars. On the iron verdict, wounded crew members lifted their heads. On the Romulus, Destiny transmitted the confirmation across every surviving internal speaker. In Medical Bay Alpha, machines continued their steady work around Una Adams' unconscious body, while the treaty announcement whispered through the walls. Thomas Hanks, still standing outside the trauma ward, heard it and looked toward the sealed doors. "You hear that, Admiral?" he said quietly. "They signed it. You got us here." Far away in the flight deck corridor, Captain Roberts stopped mid-stride as the announcement reached him. He closed his eyes for 1 second, and Sarah Connor's final order returned to him with painful clarity. "Come back alive." He opened his eyes again and whispered, "Treaty signed, Lieutenant. We held." Back in the Grand Accord chamber, Gardo released the signing stylus with a hand that trembled only after the history was complete. Sanchez touched his arm once, steadying him. Henry stared at the joined seals like a scientist watching a star ignite. Edison did not celebrate. He watched the seal burn above the table, then looked toward the chamber's observation window, where the stars waited beyond layers of armored glass. "Nova wanted to stop this," he said. Vorgon stood beside him. "They failed." "No," Edison said, his voice low. "They revealed themselves." The words settled over the chamber colder than the bells were warm. Vorgon turned his head slightly, understanding the difference. The treaty had been signed, but peace had not arrived. Not yet. What had arrived was alignment. Gardo stepped beside them, his voice quiet but firm. "Then we use the treaty for what it was built to do. We expose the corruption, secure the honest council members, and make Nova answer without letting them choose the battlefield." Vorgon's eyes narrowed with approval. "You speak like someone who has learned that diplomacy is war conducted with witnesses." Gardo gave him a tired smile. "Today has been educational." Edison finally turned from the window. "Fleet Admiral Vorgon, by authority of the newly signed accord, I request immediate joint security access to the compromised council records, Nova-linked financial routes, intelligence handler logs, and every sealed frontier dead zone file your empire has buried." The Cygnus ambassadors exchanged uneasy glances. Vorgon did not. "Granted," he said. One of the ambassadors stiffened. "Fleet Admiral, that level of access requires council review." Vorgon turned slowly. "The council is under investigation by treaty authority. If any member objects, I will ask whether their objection comes from patriotism, fear, or Nova payment." No one objected again. Above the treaty table, the joined seal continued to burn. Earth and Cygnus had not become friends in that chamber. Friendship was too small a word for what had been forged. They had become witnesses to each other's wounds, partners in a war neither had wanted, and keepers of a warning older than either empire wanted to admit. And somewhere beyond the secured station walls, beyond the fleets, beyond the mapped stars, the darkness that had marked Seoul continued its long approach. Some celebrated the signing, while others watched in silence, their doubts buried beneath polite applause. For both sides, the accord was not perfect, but it was workable, a fragile first step toward a new frontier, and perhaps a true peace treaty in the near future. Humanity had taken its second step. The third and final step between Cygnus and Earth still waited somewhere ahead. Then, far beyond the mapped stars, where no human or Cygnus sensor should have been listening, the darkness answered. Chapter 18. As the orbital station quieted for the first time since the signing, Fleet Admiral Edison glanced toward Vorgon and lowered his voice. "Old friend, do you have an extra room where we can talk privately? I mean a very private room." Vorgon's 6 eyes narrowed with understanding. "Yes," the Cygnus Fleet Admiral replied. "I know a place on this station." They walked side by side through the thinning crowd, past diplomats pretending not to watch, and guards pretending not to listen. For several steps, neither admiral spoke. The station's celebration faded behind them, replaced by the low hum of sealed doors and distant machinery. Edison finally broke the silence. "You granted us access quickly." Vorgon's lower eyes shifted toward him. "You asked under treaty authority." "That is not what I meant." Vorgon stopped walking. For a moment, the corridor seemed to narrow around them. "Then say what you mean, old friend." Edison turned to face him. "I mean you were ready. Too ready. You knew the council rot was deeper than you admitted in the chamber." Vorgon's jaw muscles tightened beneath his armored cheek plates. "And you brought a fleet, an interrogation prisoner, and a war hero in a coma to a treaty signing. Do not lecture me about arriving prepared." Edison's eyes hardened. "Prepared is one thing. Silent is another." "And trust," Vorgon replied, voice dropping into a growl, "is not the same as confession." Edison stepped closer, close enough that the nearest Cygnus guard shifted one claw toward his weapon before Vorgon raised a hand and stopped him. "Nova murdered my daughter," Edison said quietly. "They tried to kill Una. They buried corruption inside your empire and used your politics as a shield. So if there is one more secret between us that puts my people in the dark, this alliance will begin with blood on its foundation." Vorgon held his stare without blinking. "Do you think I don't know blood, Edison? Do you think Cygnus has not buried hatchlings, commanders, colonies, and names too old for any bell to remember?" His voice lowered further. "I kept silence because one wrong accusation inside my council would have sent the traitors underground before we could prove anything." Edison did not soften. "And now?" Vorgon leaned in until his shadow fell across both of them. "Now the treaty gives us a blade sharp enough to cut them out." For a long moment, the two fleet admirals stood in the corridor, with history still ringing faintly behind them. Then Edison gave the smallest nod. "Good. Because I did not ask for a private room to celebrate." Vorgon's expression darkened. "Neither did I." He turned toward a side passage marked only by an Imperial maintenance glyph and a security seal older than the station's public charter. "The room I am taking you to does not exist on any official map. No council recorder, no diplomatic archive, no witness unless we invite one." Edison followed him into the shadowed passage. "Then let us hope, old friend, that whatever truth is waiting inside that room is worth the risk of both of us walking in alive." Vorgon keyed the hidden door open. "Hope is for diplomats," he said. "We will use evidence." "Out of nowhere," Edison muttered, almost to himself. "I feel like glassing someone's homeworld. The Nova Empire comes to mind." Vorgon stopped walking and stared at him for a long, unreadable moment. Then, slowly and with genuine warmth, the Cygnus Fleet Admiral smiled. "I was wondering when you would say that." Edison blinked, then let out a low chuckle. "Damn. I have to admit, I almost forgot how much we used to think alike." For another long moment, both fleet admirals simply looked at each other. Then the tension finally cracked, and they laughed, deep, hearty, and far too honestly for two men standing on the edge of another war. Vorgon's laughter faded first, though the smile remained in his eyes. "You always did choose the least diplomatic solution, and then pretend it was strategy." Edison wiped one hand across his face, still fighting the last edge of a laugh. "It usually became strategy after the explosion stopped." Vorgon gave a low rumble of approval. "True. I remember the Sarek Gate incident." Edison pointed at him. "You promised never to mention Sarek Gate." "I promised never to mention it in front of diplomats," Vorgon corrected. "There are no diplomats here." Edison glanced down the empty corridor. "Give it 5 minutes, Gardo has a gift for appearing whenever someone says something actionable. Vorgon clicked his mandibles in amusement. Your ambassador has courage. He has timing, Edison said. Courage is what happens when the timing goes bad. Vorgon studied him for a moment, the humor softening into something older. You have not changed as much as you pretend. Edison's smile thinned. Neither of you. You still hide half your plans behind silence and call it patience. And you still mistake patience for dishonesty. Only when it comes from people I trust. Vorgon's expression shifted at that. Just slightly, but enough. Then you still trust me. Edison looked toward the hidden door ahead. I would not be walking into a room that does not exist if I did not. For a few steps, the corridor held only their boots and the distant echo of station machinery. Then Vorgon said, quieter. When we served together, I once believed humans were fragile creatures, with loud mouths and short lives. Edison glanced at him. And now? Vorgon's smile returned, smaller but genuine. Now I believe humans are fragile creatures with loud mouths, short lives, and an infuriating habit of surviving things that should have killed them. Edison nodded gravely. That is the nicest thing you have ever said about my species. Do not get sentimental, Vorgon said. It weakens the insult. Edison's amusement faded just enough to let the truth through. I missed this, he admitted. Vorgon stopped beside the hidden door controls and looked at him. The insults. The honesty underneath them. For once, Vorgon did not answer with a joke. He placed one clawed hand against the sealed panel. So did I, old friend. The lock recognized him and began to cycle open. Then let us ruin a conspiracy together, like professionals. Edison's grin returned, cold and familiar. Professionals would file a committee request. Vorgon stepped into the dark chamber beyond. Then let us ruin it properly. Both fleet admirals stepped into the secret room, and for a brief moment, they allowed themselves to sit in silence, relieved of war, politics, and the weight of two civilizations pressing against their shoulders. Edison leaned back in his chair and stared at the dark tabletop. This is why Earth removed the old political systems of our past, he muttered. They divided us for far too long. Vorgon rested both hands on the edge of the table, his claws tapping once against the black alloy. Cygnus never removed ours, he said quietly. We refined them, dressed them in honor, buried them beneath oaths and ceremony, and told ourselves that made them stronger. His 6 eyes lifted toward Edison. But old houses remember old grudges. Councils remember old insults. Bloodlines remember who bowed first and who refused. We call it tradition because admitting it as weakness would shame too many powerful names. Edison studied him across the table. You sound like a man who has wanted to say that for a long time. Vorgon gave a humorless rumble. I sound like a man who has watched good warriors die because politicians needed one more day to protect their pride. He leaned back, the chair creaking beneath his weight. Perhaps Earth was brutal enough to cut away what divided it. Cygnus was civilized enough to preserve the knife and call it heritage. For a moment, Edison said nothing. Then Vorgon's expression hardened with old frustration. Do not misunderstand me, old friend. I love my people. I would burn whole star lanes to protect them. But my empire has learned how to survive corruption by pretending it is protocol. That ends now. He lowered his voice. If Earth truly escaped its old divisions, then perhaps Cygnus can learn from that. Or perhaps we will have to bleed first, as your world did. Edison met his gaze. Unity cost us centuries. Vorgon nodded once. Then I will not insult it by calling it easy. He glanced toward the sealed door behind them, where the station's celebration had become only a distant vibration. But if this treaty is to mean anything, Cygnus must do more than sign beside Earth. We must become worthy of standing there. For now, we concentrate on perfecting the alliance, Fleet Admiral Edison said. Quietly, we investigate corruption inside both our empires. Whatever evidence we already have is not enough. We build the case piece by piece before we go public. And while we do that, we prepare for war. Vorgon did not answer at once. Instead, he reached beneath the table and pressed 3 recessed controls in a sequence too fast for human eyes to follow. The room darkened. The wall swallowed the last traces of station light, and a thin ring of blue-black energy rose from the center of the table. Edison straightened. That is not a conference system. Vorgon's expression hardened. No, it is an Imperial dead archive, older than this station, older than most of the council families who believe they own history. A sealed data sphere formed inside the ring, its surface marked by a broken Nova cipher and 3 Cygnus military seals burned through the encryption like wounds. Edison's eyes narrowed. You had this before the treaty. Vorgon held his stare. Yes. The word landed heavily between them. How long? Edison asked. 3 weeks before your fleet entered Cygnus space. For a moment, the old camaraderie vanished. Edison's voice became dangerously quiet. And you waited until now. Vorgon's 6 eyes did not blink. Because 2 voices inside this recording could have shattered the accord before we had enough proof to protect it. I chose silence to keep the traitors close. Edison leaned forward. Then stop choosing silence. Vorgon placed 1 claw against the sphere. Static cracked through the hidden speakers. A distorted Nova voice emerged first, clipped and formal beneath heavy encryption. Phase 3 remains viable. Earth delegation survived first contact. DEATHCORE response capacity confirmed. Rear Admiral Adam remains primary disruption target. Edison went still. The name struck the room like a physical impact. Vorgon watched him carefully, but did not stop the recording. A second voice entered, lower, older, and unmistakably Cygnus. The translator hesitated before rendering the words. If Adam dies before treaty consolidation, Edison destabilizes. If Edison destabilizes, Earth's political restraint fractures. The accord can be discredited as grief-driven militarism. Edison's hands closed slowly on the edge of the table. One of your own helped target Una. Vorgon's jaw muscles tightened beneath his armored cheek plates. Yes. The recording continued. The Nova officer spoke again. The Edison bloodline remains a pressure point. Previous operation against Junior Ambassador Erica Edison produced long-term destabilization potential, but failed to break command discipline. The Cygnus voice answered, colder now. Then increase pressure through the chosen hatchling. If Una Adam dies, the father responds. If the father responds, Nova obtains the war it can publicly blame on Earth. For several seconds, there was no sound, except the low hiss of the archive system. Edison stared at the data sphere, as if he could reach through it, and close his hands around the unseen speaker's throat. They did not just kill Erica, he said. They studied what her death did to me. Vorgon's voice dropped. And they studied what Una means to you. Edison looked up at him, grief and fury buried beneath a commander's stillness. Who is the Cygnus speaker? Vorgon touched the sphere again. A voice print lattice unfolded above the table, lines of red authentication failure cutting through the blue projection. Not confirmed. The voice print is masked through an Imperial intelligence filter. But the access path narrows the origin to 3 council houses, 1 military oversight office, and an intelligence directorate that should have been dissolved after the Second Frontier Purge. Edison gave a cold smile. Should have been dissolved. That is always where the bodies are buried. Vorgon inclined his head. And where old knives are stored. The recording shifted. Static deepened until it became something almost rhythmic, a pulse beneath the voices. Then the Nova officer spoke again, but this time the confidence was gone. Outer dark signal confirmed. The marker responded to treaty activation. Soul designation remains active. Cygnus, secondary gate, has awakened. Edison looked sharply at Vorgon. Secondary gate? Vorgon's eyes darkened. That phrase appears in sealed frontier myths, not military doctrine. The Cygnus traitor whispered through the archive, each translated word landing with ritual weight. Then Phase 3 begins, whether Nova survives or not. The treaty has opened the path. The second gate has heard them. The recording ended. Silence returned to the secret room, heavier than before. Edison leaned back slowly, the rage in him no longer hot, but organized. Vorgon remained standing, one hand still resting on the dead archive controls. Nova wanted me to become the weapon, Edison said. They wanted my grief to fire the first shot. Vorgon nodded. Yes. Then we disappoint them. Edison's voice hardened. We investigate quietly. We build proof. We identify every corrupted name inside Cygnus and every sympathizer inside Earth. Then we remove them before Phase 3 can use them. Vorgon's mandibles tightened in a grim smile. A joint Black Ops cell. Edison nodded. Deathcore intelligence, your loyal inner guard. Destiny, if she can survive the damage, and no one else until we know who is clean. Before Vorgon could answer, the data sphere pulsed once with crimson light. Both admirals reached for their sidearms at the same time. A new line of symbols appeared above the table. They were not human. They were not Cygnus. The translator struggled, fractured the characters, then forced 5 words into existence. The second gate has opened. So what is next, old friend? Vorgon asked. Edison looked at the dead archive sphere, then back at Vorgon with a wicked smile. Glass a few planets. Vorgon laughed wickedly as well. Little boys and their boomsticks, always wanting to blow shit up. Edison gave him a wounded look. I prefer the term strategic enthusiasm. Vorgon's laugh deepened. Strategic enthusiasm once put a moon in a slightly different orbit. It was a hostile moon, Edison said. It was a customs checkpoint. It was judging me. Vorgon leaned back in his chair, mandibles clicking with amusement. You humans have a gift for turning poor impulse control into military doctrine. Edison tapped the table once. And yet here you are, asking for my help. Yes, Vorgon replied, still smiling. Because when the universe needs something broken quickly, I know exactly which lunatic to call. Edison raised an eyebrow. Lunatic is a harsh word. Accurate words often are. Careful, old friend. Keep insulting me, and I may start feeling appreciated. Vorgon gave him a grave nod. Then I will balance it. You are reckless, stubborn, politically inconvenient, and the only human I know who can make planetary bombardment sound like a scheduling conflict. Edison considered that, then shrugged. I have been called worse in committee. Vorgon's smile widened. Committees lack imagination. For a moment, the two admirals let the laughter sit between them like an old medal pulled from a drawer. Battered, ugly, and impossible to throw away. Then Edison looked back at the crimson pulse fading from the dead archive sphere. Jokes aside, he said, if Phase 3 is real, we may not get to choose where the first fire falls. Vorgon's humor dimmed, but did not vanish. Then we aim carefully. Edison's wicked smile returned, thinner now. And if careful fails, Vorgon rested one clawed hand on the table. Then, old friend, we make the universe regret giving us ammunition. Because the Galactic Empire Nova struck humanity first, I will still consider that an act of war, Edison said. Vorgon nodded slowly. Indeed, he replied. Then his expression hardened. But it must be a political war as much as a military one. We strike only military bases, command structures, shipyards, weapons depots, and fleet infrastructure. No civilian targets, no population centers, no worlds burned for revenge. Vorgon studied him for a long moment, the wicked humor gone from his face. Good, he said at last. That is the answer I needed to hear. Edison's eyes narrowed. Needed? Vorgon leaned forward, his 6 eyes fixed on him. Yes, because rage is easy, old friend. Any fool with a fleet can turn cities into fire and call it justice. But restraint after blood has been spilled. That is command. Edison looked away for a moment, jaw tight. Vorgon's voice softened, though it lost none of its weight. Nova wants us to become monsters in front of the galaxy. They want Earth angry, Cygnus divided, civilians burning, and every neutral world whispering that the new alliance is more dangerous than the empire it opposes. He tapped one claw against the table. We will not give them that victory. For once, Edison did not answer with sarcasm. Vorgon placed one fist against his chest in a quiet Cygnus salute. If Earth strikes only the sword hand, not the helpless body, then Cygnus can stand beside you, before our people, our council, and every watching star. We can call it defense. We can call it justice. And when Nova screams that we are aggressors, the evidence will answer louder than their propaganda. Edison exhaled slowly. So, no glassing homeworlds. Vorgon's mandibles clicked once, almost sadly. Not today. Then the old, dangerous smile returned by a fraction. But if they hide weapons behind palaces, command bunkers beneath royal gardens, or fleet corps under sacred monuments, I will personally help you write the targeting exceptions. Edison's mouth twitched. That is the most diplomatic thing you have said all night. Do not spread rumors, Vorgon replied. I have a reputation to maintain. Chapter 19. 24 hours later, aboard the Mars Military Orbital Station, Captain Luna Adams sat behind her office desk, buried under reports, requisition forms, casualty updates, and repair projections that all somehow managed to say the same miserable thing. The Phoenix patrol fleet would not be combat ready for another 2 months. Luna leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling as if it had personally offended her. God damn it, she muttered to the empty office. This shit is boring as hell. Damn that space squid for putting me out of a job. The stack of digital paperwork blinked for her attention. She ignored it on principle. Outside the viewport, Mars turned slowly beneath the station, red and silent, while repair docks crawled with crews patching the broken bones of her fleet. Every ship under her command was alive, but wounded. Every captain wanted spare parts. Every engineer wanted more time. Every report made her feel like she was commanding a graveyard with engines. Then her personal comm buzzed. Luna frowned. The channel was private, encrypted, and marked with a family priority tag she had not seen since Yuna left for Cygnus. She opened the message. Hey, little sister. Hope your day is treating you well. I don't know when I'll be back again. Anyway, take care. Godspeed. And I miss you lots. Luna read the text once, then again. The words sounded like Yuna. The warmth was there. The teasing softness was there. Even the way she wrote Godspeed felt right. And yet something about it was wrong. Not the words. Not exactly. It was the space between them. Yuna always cursed when she was worried. She always dodged emotion with a joke before letting anything honest through. She would have called Luna baby sister, not little sister, if she thought she might not come home soon. Luna sat forward slowly, the boredom draining out of her like air from a breached compartment. She checked the sender signature. Rear Admiral Una Adam. Authentication valid. Encryption valid. Transmission delay normal. Too normal. Her thumb hovered over the reply icon. For several seconds, she did not move. A cold feeling crawled up the back of her neck, the same instinct that had whispered before she noticed the missing frigates. Luna let her thumb fall away from the reply icon. No. Not yet. If Una had really sent the message, waiting a day or two would not hurt anything. If someone else had sent it, then answering too quickly might tell them she had noticed something was wrong. She locked the message behind a private security tag, marked it for silent monitoring, and closed the screen before the temptation to respond could win. "Give it a day," she muttered. "Maybe 2. Then we see who answers back." Back aboard the Iron Verdict, in the docking bay near Medical Bay Alpha, Hank stood beside the rescue craft and tried to process everything he had almost lost that day. The battle had finally died down, but the silence afterward felt heavier than the gunfire. He looked toward the 3 Marines who had ridden into the debris field with him and jerked his thumb toward the exit ramp. "Hey, boys. I'm heading back to the Romulus. Y'all coming?" All 3 answered at once. "Hell yeah." Marine 3 gave the wounded ship a long look through the bay doors and added, "Home is where the heart is." Marine 2 snapped back without missing a beat. "You mean where your adult videos are?" Marine 1 snorted, and Hanks broke into a tired laugh despite himself. After everything they had seen, the stupid joke landed exactly where it needed to. Hanks and the 3 Marines boarded the rescue vessel, carrying Lieutenant Sarah Connor with them. Hanks had made the decision himself. The Romulus was her home now, and that was where she belonged. No one argued. No one joked. The 4 living men strapped in around the covered trauma sled in silence, giving Connor the only escort they could still offer her. Then the hatch sealed, the clamps released, and all 5 of them blasted away from the Iron Verdict, heading back toward the wounded ship that had become both battlefield and home. The ride back was short, but it felt longer than any jump Hanks had ever taken. The rescue vessel crossed the wounded gap between flagships under quiet clearance, its engines humming low, while the Romulus grew larger in the forward glass. The dreadnought looked like a god that had survived an execution attempt, bridge armor torn open, emergency plating sealed across the wound, repair drones crawling over the hull like silver ants, and streaks of scorched metal marking where Nova fire had tried to cut the heart out of the ship. No one in the rescue craft spoke. Marine 1 sat at the co-pilot station with both hands locked around his harness. Marine 2 kept his eyes on the covered trauma sled. Marine 3, who had not stopped joking since the first bad decision of the day, stared at the deck and said nothing at all. That silence told Hanks more than words could have. Some jokes were survival tools. Some moments deserved to be left alone. "Rescue vessel, this is Romulus docking control," a tired voice said over the comm. "Bay 3 is open. Medical honor detail is standing by. Maintain approach vector." Hanks swallowed hard before answering. "Copy. Bay 3. We are bringing Lieutenant Sarah Connor home." For a second, there was only static. Then the docking controller's voice returned, softer than before. "Understood, rescue vessel. Welcome home." The rescue craft slipped through the bay shield and settled onto the deck with a tired groan. The landing clamps locked beneath them, but Hanks did not move right away. Through the side viewport, he saw the docking bay waiting in formation. Deckhands stood shoulder to shoulder. Marines lined the path to the medical lift. Pilots from Roberts's squadrons had gathered near the launch rails, helmets tucked beneath their arms, faces streaked with smoke and exhaustion. No one had ordered them there. They had come because word traveled faster than command when the dead were coming home. The hatch opened with a hiss. Hank stepped down first, then turned back and helped guide the trauma sled over the threshold. The 3 Marines took positions around it without speaking. The moment Sarah Connor's covered form cleared the ramp, the entire bay came to attention. Not sharply, not with parade perfection. It was rough, tired, wounded, and real. Grease-stained mechanics straightened beside half-repaired fighters. Medics stopped pushing carts. A fuel tech with a bandaged head lifted one shaking hand to salute. Even the repair drones seemed to hum lower as the trauma sled rolled between the living. Hanks walked beside the sled, eyes forward, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. He had flown through debris, dragged an admiral out of the void, and watched medics fight death with both hands. None of that prepared him for the sound of an entire docking bay choosing silence. Destiny's voice came over the overhead speakers, quieter than Hanks had ever heard her. Lieutenant Sarah Connor, former officer of the Phoenix, attached to DEATHCORE operations during the Cygnus engagement, has returned aboard the Romulus. Her watch is complete. The words rolled through the bay like a bell no one had built. Captain Roberts stood near the forward lift, still in his flight suit. He had beaten them there somehow. His face was composed, but Hanks could see the cost of that control in the way his fingers curled around his helmet. Roberts stepped forward as the sled reached him. For one breath, he looked down at the covered form and let the entire bay witness the grief he could no longer hide. Then he came to attention and raised his salute. Every pilot followed. Every Marine followed. Every deckhand who had a free hand followed too. "Lieutenant Connor," Roberts said, his voice carrying without needing to be loud. "Welcome home." Hanks felt his throat tighten. Beside him, Marine 3 wiped at his visor and muttered, "Damn dust in the docking bay." Marine 2 elbowed him lightly, but there was no joke behind it. Marine 1 only nodded once, eyes fixed ahead. The trauma sled continued toward the lift, escorted by medics and honor guard. When the doors closed around Sarah Connor, the bay remained still for several seconds longer, as if no one wanted to be the first to admit the moment had ended. Then the ship shuddered faintly beneath a distant repair impact, and duty returned one breath at a time. Roberts lowered his salute and turned to Hanks. "You brought her where she belonged." Hanks shook his head. "I just flew the ugly bird, sir." "No," Roberts said. "You made a choice. There is a difference." He looked toward the closed lift doors. "And for what it is worth, Shot-Eye, that choice mattered." Hanks did not know what to do with that, so he did what he always did when emotion got too close. He looked around the damaged bay and cleared his throat. "Permission to check on the repair crews before somebody makes a spiritual mistake with a plasma wrench?" Roberts almost smiled. Almost. "Granted." "And Hanks?" "Sir?" "Do not let anyone call that rescue craft ugly again." Hanks glanced back at the battered little vessel, its hull scorched, dented, and still leaking coolant from a place coolant definitely should not leak. "With respect, Captain, she is ugly as sin." Roberts looked at the craft, then at the path Sarah Connor had taken home. "Maybe," he said, "but today she earned a name." Marine 3 raised one hand carefully. "Can we name her the Bad Decision?" For the first time since the sled had entered the bay, a quiet laugh moved through the crew. It was small, fragile, and exactly enough. Hanks looked toward the lift doors, then back to the rescue craft. "No," he said softly. "Call her Homebound." Hanks hesitated near the battered rescue craft, then looked back at Captain Roberts. "Captain Roberts, before I head back to work, I know you and Sarah had something between you. That's why I brought her home. Not for the Romulus, for you." Roberts looked at him for a long moment, grief and gratitude tightening his voice. "Thank you, Thomas Hanks," he replied softly. "Thank you for understanding what she meant to me. I deeply appreciate it, brother." Back aboard Omega Cygnus 13, in the same hidden chamber where the treaty's darkest truths had been exposed, Fleet Admiral Edison reached into the inner pocket of his uniform and placed a small blue and red data chip on the table between them. Vorgon's 6 eyes narrowed at once. The chip was no larger than a human thumbnail, but the encryption pattern glowing across its surface was unmistakable. DEATHCORE command architecture, sealed under Admiral-level authority. "Vorgon," Edison said, his voice quieter than before, "I have a gift for you." Vorgon did not touch it. "That is not a gift," he said slowly. "That is a war starting in someone's pocket." Edison allowed himself the faintest smile. "It is a schematic blueprint packet. Limited technology from my DEATHCORE fleet. Defensive interface systems, modular repair architecture, shield harmonic stabilizers, and non-lethal countermeasure designs. Nothing that lets your engineers crack our core weapons, reactors, teleportation math, or command encryption." Only then did Vorgon look surprised. Not politically surprised, personally surprised. "Are you sure about this?" "Yes," Edison replied. "For now, it is only 5%. He pushed the chip closer. "Enough to prove trust, not enough to make either of us stupid." Vorgon finally reached for the chip, but his claws stopped just above it. 5% of DEATHCORE technology would make some council houses kill for access. "Then hide it from the ones who would," Edison said. "Give it to the ones who still remember what honor means." Vorgon looked up from the data chip, and for the first time since the treaty bells had rung, the old warrior's expression softened. "You would place this much faith in me?" Edison leaned back in his chair. "Old friend, if I did not trust you, I would have brought a bomb instead." Vorgon gave a deep, wicked laugh and closed his hand around the chip. "That is the most human expression of friendship I have ever heard." "You deserve it," Edison said. The humor faded from his face. "And more than that, Cygnus will need it. If the second gate is opened, then the next war will not care where our borders end." He leaned closer, his voice dropping until it seemed meant only for the hidden room and the old warrior across from him. "I know for a fact the Nova Empire is not the true enemy. They shed first blood against humanity, and for that, they will answer. But they are not the darkness moving toward us." Vorgon's grip tightened around the data chip. "Then what is?" Edison looked toward the sealed walls, as if he could see past the station, past Cygnus, past every mapped star. "Our true enemy is still waiting in the deep dark," he said. "Nova is only the first wound. Whatever opened that gate is the blade behind it." "I will tell you only this much," Edison said, "because the truth is, I do not have full intelligence on it yet. Whatever is moving out there, whatever answered the second gate, it is not close. Not by our measure of time. Best estimate says it reaches us in 100 to 150 years. Vorgon's grip tightened around the data chip. "That is a long time for politicians," he said. "For empires, it is tomorrow." Edison smiled faintly. "I was thinking the same thing." Vorgon set the data chip down between two clawed fingers, though he did not release it. "A century is enough time for cowards to pretend there is no danger. It is also enough time for fools to start 3 smaller wars and forget why the first warning mattered. That is why I am not giving this to your council," Edison said. "I am giving it to you. Councils will debate until the stars go cold. Fleet admirals count ships, graves, and time." Vorgon's upper eyes remained fixed on Edison, while the lower pair studied the chip. "You understand what you are asking of me? If I hide this from the wrong houses, I become a traitor to protocol. If I reveal it too soon, I feed it to the traitors we are hunting." "Then be a traitor to protocol," Edison replied. "Protocol does not bleed. People do." For a moment, Vorgon said nothing. Then his mandibles clicked once in grim approval. "You have become more dangerous with age." Edison shrugged. "Age teaches patience. Grief teaches precision." Vorgon's expression darkened at that. "Erica." Edison's smile vanished. "And Yuna." The secret room seemed to grow smaller around the two names. Vorgon bowed his head, not as an admiral, but as an old warrior who understood that some wounds became command decisions if left untended. "If Rear Admiral Adam wakes," Vorgon said, "she will want to return to duty before her surgeons finish threatening her." "If?" Edison repeated softly. Vorgon lifted both hands slightly. "When," he corrected. "When she wakes, she will try to stand before she can breathe without machinery. You will tell her no. She will ignore you. Destiny will insult both of you. Then your medical staff will consider mutiny." Edison let out a tired laugh. "That sounds painfully accurate." "Good," Vorgon said. "Then we plan as if she survives." Edison looked down at the blue and red chip. "She will need a fleet that can fight without her for a while. Roberts can hold aviation together. Hanks is chaos wearing boots, but useful chaos. Destiny, if repaired, can coordinate intelligence faster than either council can lie." Vorgon gave a low rumble. "You trust a reckless seaman near your contingency planning." "I trust him near doors that need opening and rules that need bending," Edison said. "There is a difference." Vorgon chuckled. "Every empire needs one fool brave enough to touch the panel everyone else is afraid of." "Preferably after being told not to," Edison added. Their laughter was brief, but it carried the relief of men who knew laughter was sometimes the only thing standing between command and madness. Then Vorgon grew serious again. "What do you want from me now?" "3 things," Edison said. "First, secure this chip inside a vault no council clerk can find. Second, build a loyal research cell around it. Engineers, strategists, and historians, not politicians. Third, open every sealed file that mentions the second gate, the outer dark, missing colonies, or monsters running from something worse." Vorgon tapped one claw against the table. "And in return?" "In return, I give you access to what DEATHCORE knows. Not everything. Not yet. But enough that when the deep dark finally reaches us, your people do not face it blind." Vorgon studied him for a long moment. "You are preparing me to survive without you." Edison did not deny it. "I am old enough to stop pretending I will be present for every war I start preventing." "Then you should also know this," Vorgon said. "If the day comes when Earth stands alone and your fleets are broken, Cygnus will answer. Not because paper says we must, because I will remember this room." Edison looked across the table, and for once, the wicked smile did not come. "That is all I needed to hear." "When Yuna wakes," Fleet Admiral Edison said, his voice lowering, "I will give her whatever she needs. 3 replacement limbs, full biological integration, neural restoration, anything our human bioengineering can provide. Not standard military stock, not whatever the medics can spare." His eyes hardened. "The very best deathcore technology we possess." Vorgon studied him carefully. "You speak like a commander ordering repairs," he said. "But your eyes speak like a father refusing to lose another child." Edison lifted one finger, half warning and half surrender. "Shh," he said, a tired smile touching his face. "Do not ruin my fatherhood moment." The joke landed softly, but the truth beneath it stayed in the room. Vorgon, our time here is almost up, Edison said. We both need to prepare for the coming war with Nova. For now, we hold back the public investigation. We do not expose the corruption inside Earth or Cygnus until Nova is dealt with, or until we have enough proof to make every traitor burn in daylight. He tapped one finger against the table. While we prepare, I will send my DBO units into the shadows. Recon only, evidence gathering only. Financial trails, hidden communications, handler names, council contacts, anything that proves Earth and Cygnus have both been poisoned from the inside. Edison looked across the table at the Cygnus Admiral. Are you planning to do the same? Vorgon's answer came without hesitation. Yes. My loyal inner guard will begin tonight. Quiet arrests where possible. Silent surveillance where necessary. No council announcement. No grand accusation. No speeches for the record. We gather proof first. Then we let the guilty discover they have already been surrounded. Edison nodded grimly. Good. Nova gets the war it earned. The traitors get the silence they deserve, right up until we close the door behind them. We have 6 months to prepare, Fleet Admiral Edison said, the words landing like a countdown. 6 months to harden our fleets, hunt the traitors, and make sure that when Nova comes for us again, they find 2 empires waiting with their teeth bared. Vorgon did not smile this time. He looked down at the blue and red data chip in his hand, then closed his claws around it, as if accepting a burden rather than a gift. 6 months, he said quietly. Then every wasted day becomes a grave we could have prevented. His 6 eyes lifted to Edison, hard with purpose. Cygnus will not waste them. I will wake the loyal houses, bury my spies deeper, and put every honest shipwright in the Empire to work. When Nova comes, they will not find frightened politicians hiding behind ceremony. Edison looked at him for a long moment, the weight of command easing just enough for the man beneath it to show. Thank you, brother, he said quietly. For once, Vorgon did not answer immediately. The word brother seemed to strike deeper than any formal oath or treaty seal. His 6 eyes lowered to the data chip clenched in his claws, then lifted again to Edison with an emotion too old and too guarded to name easily. Among my people, Vorgon said at last, that word is not given lightly. Hatchlings share blood. Warriors share battle. But brothers share the burden after the battle is over, when the dead are counted, and the living must decide whether grief will make them wiser or crueler. He placed one fist against his chest, slower this time, not as a fleet admiral before an ally, but as an old warrior answering a bond that had survived distance, silence, politics, and war. If you call me brother, Edison, then know what you are asking. You are not asking for ships. You are not asking for spies. You are asking me to stand beside your ghosts as well as your soldiers. Edison's expression tightened, but he did not look away. Vorgon continued, voice low and rough. Erica's name will not be buried only in Earth records. Yuna's fight will not be remembered only by DEATHCORE. If Cygnus stands with humanity, then your dead become warnings in our halls. Your wounded become reasons for our vigilance, and your enemies become questions my empire can no longer ignore. The old warrior's mandibles clicked once, almost like a bitter laugh. And yes, before you ask, I will still insult you at every available opportunity. Brotherhood should not be confused with mercy. A faint smile returned to Edison's face. I would be disappointed if you stopped. Vorgon leaned forward, the humor fading again. Then hear my answer clearly, brother. Cygnus will prepare. My loyal houses will wake. My shipyards will burn bright. My spies will crawl into every dark corner Nova believed was safe. And when the day comes, whether in 6 months or a century. When your enemies reach for Earth, they will find Cygnus claws already around their throat. He pushed the data chip into a hidden compartment beneath his armor, sealing it with a pulse of blue light. This room, this gift, this oath, I will remember all of it, not because the treaty commands me to, because you trusted me when trust was the most dangerous weapon either of us could carry. Edison looked at the sealed compartment, then back at the old warrior across from him. Then let the traitors keep their secrets for a little while longer, he said, his voice quiet but unbreakable. When the time comes, brother, we will open every locked door, drag every hidden enemy into the light, and remind Nova that trust is not weakness. It is the fuse. Then Edison's expression hardened, and the warmth between old friends gave way to the Admiral, who had survived too many wars to mistake silence for peace. But hear me clearly, Vorgon, he said. If Nova thinks 6 months will make us hesitate, if they believe grief has made Earth reckless or Cygnus divided, then they are about to learn the cost of bad intelligence. We will not fire first. We will not strike civilians. We will not become the monsters they need us to be. He leaned closer, voice dropping into something colder than anger. But if Nova crosses that line again, if they touch Earth, Cygnus, our fleets, our children, or the fragile peace we just dragged out of fire, then we will answer as one. Not with rage, not with panic, with evidence, precision, and enough force to make every empire watching the stars understand this warning. The Sol Cygnus Accord is not a shield for the weak. It is the line before the abyss.